Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening for the friends who are not based in Taiwan. So my name is Desmond Sham. I'm an assistant professor at the International Master's Program in Inter-Asia Cultural Studies at the National Curatorial University. So welcome to the talk and welcome to this new normal that we have online talk. So today we're very delighted to have Dr. Biung Ismahasan for sharing with us Decolonising Indigenous Taiwanese Curatorial Initiative. And Dr. Biung is an independent curator from the Taiwanese Indigenous Bunun Nation. He received his PhD in curating at the Center for Curatorial Studies, University of Essex and UK. And Dr. Biung, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. And my name is Biung Ismahasan. Firstly, thank you, Desmond Sham, for inviting me to have this talk online. And due to the COVID-19, we transformed the actual lecture into the digital presentation. And I would say, Uninanga Migumisan, Saking Hai, Biung Ismahasan, Tagisha, Taiwan to Takauji do Namasha do Bunun. I spoke my Bunun languages. My name is Biung Ismahasan. I came from Takanua community, Namasha, in the southern part of Taiwan. I'm staying with my ancestor in this digital space to share the beauties of my culture and arts. And this talk attempt to explore how trans-indigenous connecting space can be devised and articulated through contemporary relational practice by adopting the approaches of curating togetherness. A number of indigenous curatorial initiatives have emerged that go beyond institutions that have been based on the collective and the community. I conceive of this curatorial initiative as both academic research and a curatorial project, the latter of which including the 2018 exhibition at Goldsmiths University of London, which is my master, which is my graduate degree of my master degree in London. This exhibition entitled Dispossessions, Performative Encounters of Taiwanese Indigenous Contemporary Art. And the 2019 exhibition at Taoyuan City Indigenous Culture Center in Taiwan, which entitled Nahi Roofed, When Death Become Experiment. And these two exhibitions both encourage the dialogue and the new ways of collective collaborated projects and thinking around the issue of the decolonial sovereignty and the power of object and material, alcoholism, shamanism and healing, trauma and transformation. Since the year of the 2005, emergence of global First Nation curators initiatives and related meeting in Canada, Indigenous performative curation and exhibition design have come together to provide a field within which to reconfigure curatorial practice and exhibition design have come together to provide a field with an idea of the visual cultures. And one question that emerged with this field is how my own role as an Taiwanese indigenous curators articulate the performative indigeneity of artists who produce the dialogic forms of solidarities and space of transformation through the collaboration. And I would like to share with the brief introduction of the indigenous Taiwanese contemporary art history. For decades, indigenous Taiwanese artists has both presented in exhibition biennale, festival and art award in Taiwan and overseas. However, the Taiwan's indigenous material and the visual culture has largely been interpreted, displayed, collected, and presented by non-indigenous scholars as curators in museum and gallery through the Western colonial ideology, Without indigenous elders' contribution of indigenous local art practitioners' perspective. And during the 1990s, with the curatorial discourses around art exhibition in Taiwan, the cultural anthropologists, sociologists, and historians played a hegemonic role by interpreting a such a discourse on indigenous Taiwanese art. There exists a dominant group of non-indigenous curators and academics identified as experts in their field of indigenous contemporary art. And they are controlling the determinant examination of Indigenous People Council art funding and dominating major publishing and curatorial contrast to the determinant of the indigenous curatorial community in Taiwan. Their misunderstanding and appropriation of Taiwanese indigenous cultures often appear within the display of artwork and they interpreted by narrative and catalog text. At the same time, there is also the lack of discussion about institutional separatism between indigenous curatorial practice and institutional curation in Taiwan. As indigenous curators, my overarching aim of this exhibition-based research is to explore how indigenous curatorial practice can be used as a medium and research methodologies in order to expand indigenous curatorial relational space through ways of curating togetherness and collaboration towards sovereignty and relationality. As everybody knows that the Taiwanese indigenous people and group currently have the 16th official recognized indigenous group. As you see this slide, I belong to the Bunun nation. I came from the Kanura community from here, and my grandmother is also from community from Namasha, called Kanakanavu Nation, and my mother came from Atayal Nation in Ilan County in our community. And this slide considered the history of the indigenous curatorial practice with a wider field of indigenous contemporary art that developed in Taiwan between the late 1990s and the late 2010s. I begin with focus on the selected exhibition that demonstrated the development within the indigenous curatorial practice in Taiwan. And specifically, I first discussed the Polima Arts Festivals, Polima Art Award, exhibition and festival. And Polima, as you can see that, which is meant the superior hand of the Taiwan nation languages from Pingdong. And this is the most significant milestone in the field since 2010. And it considers how indigenous curators and artists have devised their collaborative strategies and have contributed to the articulation of indigenous performative beyond the dominant narrative. And the year of the 1994 can be understood as the most significant in the wider societal acceptance of indigenous people own names from their nation. That years that private sectors, Shunyi, the Museum of Formosa Aboriginal, the Shunyi Taiwan Yuanzhumin Boruguan, opened and organized the first art award for Taiwanese indigenous wooden sculpture. In 1996, the Council of Indigenous People was established. A few months later, the Taipei Biennial, entitled The Press for Identity, and organized by Taipei Fine Art Museum Director Zhang Zhenyu, was divided into 6 thematic catalogs as realized by a distinctive coordinators and curators. Together, these coordinators and curators invited Biung Ismahasan Nation artists named Hagu Chen Wensheng, to participate in the exhibition's suggestivities of Taiwanese art, sensuality, and authority. And this exhibition examined what is called the problem of subjectivities and gave audience a real discursive experience in the Taiwanese outside and the problem of subjectivity appear as the measures of complex, commentary, and artistic practice. When Taiwan's artistic subjectivities eventually evolved into the comprehensive understanding of diverse artistic creation, the question of subjectivity remains as ongoing concern for the contemporary art community as well as for the emerging political class. In the terms of indigenous cultures exchange, the Taipei Fine Art Museum held a group exhibition and entitled Ancestor, Sword, and the Life of the Taiwanese Aborigines between the Taiwanese Indigenous people and the First Nation contemporary artists from Canada. This landmark exhibition, curated by the National Museum of History, 国立历史博物馆, in 1999, showed contemporary Aboriginal art for the first time in Taiwan. In 2012, the Council of Indigenous People and Kaohsiung Museum of Fine Arts sent the first Taiwanese delegation, a group of artists from the cradles of the Austronesian people and languages, to the 11th edition of Festival of Pacific Art in Solomon Islands. This cultural exchange aimed at further strengthening the tie between the represented cultures and the foreign network by sharing the outcomes of artistic creation and curatorial practice with each other. In addition, the Kaohsiung Museum of Fine Art organized the exhibition Beyond the Boundary, the Contemporary Indigenous Art of Taiwan, which toured the Chibawu Cultural Centers, Chibawu Wenhua Zhongxin, with the names of the shuttering the distance between each other through art and celebrating the performative encounters and exhibition practice. The Chibawu Cultural Centers is a renowned centers of contemporary Pacific art. Since 2007, the centers has worked with the Kaohsiung Museum of Fine Art in developing the platform for contemporary indigenous artists in Taiwan and other Austronesian Iceland to have exchange benefiting their artistic practice and foreign connection. The Indigenous People Cultural Foundation made a significant contribution to the development of the milestone group exhibition of Indigenous contemporary art in Taiwan, the Biennale Pulima Art Festival of the World Exhibition is a showcase and celebration of contemporary Indigenous art and culture, and diversity of topics addressed in this Indigenous world, such as the tribal lands, the natural environment, Indigenous history, and the reinventation of tradition. Although the variations in form and the topics all awarded word shared in common a quest for an experimentation with the ways of applying and reinterpreting the core values of Indigenous tradition, which is art in the service of the community. In the context of contemporary culture where individuality and originality are valued, the Pulima Art Festival showed the new light on the curatorial intention of this exhibition, focused on how Indigenous curators not only position historical world of Indigenous contemporary art, but also contribute to determine a curatorial themes for the group exhibition. In order to realize this indigenous curatorial initiative, I adopted an interdisciplinary approach. This involved investigating the numbers of fields related to this research, such as indigenous curatorial theory and practice, decolonial aesthetics and criticism, the concept of performative indigeneity, and the technique of exhibition design. At the core of my approach is indigenous curatorial practice, which has served as the principal means for responding to Bunun ontological relationship with Malusku Masdala. The Bunun concept of coexistent land, which also means humanity and field towards the earth and the life in many First Nation cultures, poses a grounded relationship between culture, both culturally and spiritually. In my work, the alternative function of the indigenous curatorial practice is to articulate in how a performative encounters can be embodied by reframing the history and the narrative within the indigenous Taiwanese curating that conveys fundamental beliefs about the nature of reality and the relationship between the human and the land. And visualizing sovereignty is an indigenous sense is similar to connected to land, which means Dala in my own languages. In my practice-based research, the word sovereignty appropriates from English languages, thus becomes a critical source of self-determination for indigenous people globally, and has been used as corrective strategies by indigenous people to counter the ongoing dispossession of our resources and land. I employed the three strategies. The first one, the curating the specificity, the new relational space, and the third is curation of trans-indigenous connecting space as an attempt to develop the process and decision-making involved in creating the specialty of the viewer, performers, and interpreters. As indigenous curators, I have a clear interest in ensuring that my curatorial approach depart from ethnographic models of display. As such, I will ask that what is the natural or ethno-accepted? What can it tell us about ourselves as native? Thus, I have an interest in unveiling the connection leading back to Taiwanese indigenous people and Taiwan contemporary art in order to echo and measure components of intersection of artistic collaboration and conversation associated with indigenous environmental values and varieties of indigenous to indigenous relation. Within such curatorial field, can I find a true expression of ourselves through the performative curatorial practice? This is my, as you can see the slide, this is my experimental curatorial practice which I curated in my community cemetery. This is my, the furnace of my left kidney that in 2005, I donated my left kidney to my father's. My father was alcoholic issue. I would like to examine that alcoholism of indigenous community in Taiwan, not only in Taiwanese community, but also across the global indigenous community, especially in Canada. And I invited performance artists and my artist friends and my community to engage my my work. And I haven't finished this project. I'm going to plan to invite more participants, for example, the Aboriginal children in my community and the young generation to participate for next year in my cemetery. And in the view of the force-mentioned issue, initiated a curatorial project in 2018, this section, Performative Encounters of Taiwanese Indigenous Community Contemporary Art, seeking to transcend the limitation of indigenous performatives by treating performative curation as a method. And this exhibition is curated at Goldsmiths, University of London Institution for Creating and Cultural Entrepreneurship. Indigeneity is the political enabling construct in the resistance to ongoing colonialism and expropriation. Performance and installation art are conceived as a vital expression of the immersion and contextual nature of indigenous cultures. As such, performative installation may be considered as an experimental from the resistance. This exhibition defines exploitation and pragmatism and primordialism by emphasizing exact self-made and reappropriate identity, offering an examples of indigenous curation from an Australasian perspective. This exhibition activate the radical flourishing of indigenous performance and installation art, despite and in response to the social environmental disruption, instability, and change. The saying and the engaging with the decolonial concept of performative indigeneity, this possession considers the ongoing struggle of indigenous people to resist erasures by engaging with artistic entanglement of curatorial collaboration and the contextualment of process. The exhibition emphasized discussion the challenges of decolonial activities and the indigenous curatorial practice and accounting for diverse modes of subjugation and subjectivities, and offering indigenous view on topics that including distinct colonial wound, the land trauma, and the meaning and the practice of sovereignty across indigeneity. By gathering the indigenous artists, the various generations, and are collectively confronting coloniality, including the coloniality of knowledge, and the coloniality of being, and the coloniality of a religion chopping spirituality, theoretical, Christian, and indigenous, secular, liberal. And maintain an indigenous centralism as a counterpart to stretch the production of knowledge about curatorial decoloniality. As snobbish curators, Wondor's snobbish search, words like returned, resurgent, and rewriting all have embedded in them a colonial idea of time, where we have not had continuity and contemporarity, or even modernity, even if otherwise than its European vision. This perception exhibition connects any process of decolonization of indigenous curatorial practice to question what the place of accepted in the colonial matrix of power, a machine that generates injustice, disavowal, silence at all levels by articulating performative usefulness and visualizing sovereignties of indigenous land bodies and the community. And this is the world. The piece is chemical quote by the Sami artist Marita. And this world explores the complex identity of intrinsic Sami and extrinsic question, responding to the past, present, and the futures of the rise of the alcohol, drunkenness, and alcohol abuse in Sami community. Cerberus Marita has the toolbox of related objects, memory, and story, which she used to discuss how drinking is connect with dispossession and is used as a form of protest. The center to dispossession is the central crop malice and its fermentation into traditional millet wine, which can be considered a symbolic ritual object of indigenous Taiwanese cultures and herding reclination and unity, in the wake of colonialism and the share of the millet wine and experimental embedded in indigenous performance art, a research pre-colonial rituals by allowing for celebration and connection. And alcohol can be mediums of bringing togetherness by allowing one person to enrich the life of another at devised moments of celebration. And I would like to play the first video with you.
Sorry, Dr. Biung, we cannot hear the sound of the video.
Okay, how about this one?
relationships between peoples and between cultures. It's part of our mission to offer these sort of experiences to our students. So to build this sort of new understanding, which is more open to different readings, visually, textually, and sound-wise, of other cultures that are often not heard or seen in contemporary art. So for us, it is really a great honor to be able to have this event with us.
Okay, if you're interested in this possession exhibition, and you can Google it. This is the article written by the Dr. Carla Figueroa from the Institution for Creative and Cultural Entrepreneurship. And this is the photos I curated exhibition at Goldsmiths in 2008. And I think this exhibition was concerned not just with transmitting and perpetuating the discourse, object, values, and practice, but also an expanded sense of mobilizing life interconnection about what performance installation by indigenous artists can reveal about relationship between land, people, land, place, and heritage. As curators, Kata Grosser Anton, right of from Office for Contemporary Art Norway, she write of indigenous aliens in Southern world to sound the global indigenous as she voiced the transnational communities active after planetary level through self-selected affected and welfare forms of solidarity, a network of non-state actors produce tour and space of transformation that rewrite both colonial and rooted mode of cultural reproduction. I also contribute one of the articles included in this book, Southern World Indigenous Art Curation and Criticism, published in December in 2018. And the Curator, the directors, invited 16 different indigenous nations across the global country. This exhibition considered the continued struggles of indigenous people to resist erasures by engaging with contemporary culture entanglements of the local, the tribal, and the global. And I hope to create an alternative curatorial shift for the further development within Taiwanese indigenous contemporary art. The history of Taiwanese Indonesian art incorporating contemporary thinking is very short. Since the middle of the 1980s, a number of leading Taiwanese indigenous artists have attempted to integrate contemporary concept and traditional technique with global cultural flow and idea in order to represent the contemporary look for Indonesian art. This exhibition examined the practice of decolonization through the indigenous curatorial collective and collaboration. When discussing decolonization in indigenous art, we often centers on the seller's colonialism as a singular structures or the curatorial event. Indigenous curators and artists must continue to respond to, return to the guest backed upon, or subverted the traditional strategies and critiques that the dominant Han-Taiwanese discourses within the art institution. Indigenous, My curatorial work on this project directed impact my understanding of how this perspective, long separate discourse of settlers, colonial, migrant, others transnational and transcultural history, and indigenous way of knowing contemporary art in act and co-constitutes the global when we work together. After the completing this section in June 2018, I decided to return back to Taiwan for a year worth of curatorial field and expanded creation preparation. I hope to bring London dispossession exhibition to Taiwan indigenous cultural sphere. For example, the Taoyuan City Indigenous Cultural Centers by raising the similar things in order to provoke the discussion between indigenous people and other citizens. In the late 2018, I was called into the act as a guest curator by the Taiwan Indigenous People Development Foundation for the year-long exhibition, Nahi Root, when Dave began the exhibition. Nahi, which means a sweet potato in Atayal Nation languages. This show reflected our confidence in programming challenge world, collaborating with 7 indigenous artists from different communities and diverse mixed media expression in highly accessible and thought-provoking ways through such social issues that including indigenous artistic process, approaches, trajectory toward the trauma and the multiple identity. I use Nahi as the exhibition title, not only to articulate indigenous way of knowing and curatorial implication, but also to visualizing sovereignty on artistic history work, rooted in engagement and their related installation. Nahi was defined as the symbols of each indigenous artist that humanist appellation used when we share work and gather together. Nahi Root established an institutional programs of the invited indigenous associate curators, myself, to program the yearly exhibition in 2019. Nahi Root Dispossession Rebirth was an experimental exhibition brought together with a site-specific curatorial focus on togetherness, artistic form of ambiguity, sociability, and sensual experience in which indigenous artists engage with the space, audience, and previous words, leading a succession trajectory along the way. I produced the 7th Things Back exhibition with 3 major topics, concept, material, including the yearly permanent exhibition. Milay Mafaliu from Biung Nation, and Milu Hayon from Atayal Nation, and now Angaika Aviana from Kanakanavu Nation. And second thing exhibition is dispossession, Alun Luluan, Lukai Nation, Pasulan Duluran, Lukai Nation. And third theme exhibition is with birth, Dong Dong Howen from the Lugu Nation from Tomon community from Hualien, and Demu Basao from Atayal Nation from Nanto community. And this curation depended on the things committed to revealing how indigenous curation as the immaterial world could also emphasize collaboration between artists and curators in which specific catalogs of this decolonization, dispossession, and sovereignty could be addressed. In particularly, and I would like to, this is specific change of this is the first Taiwanese indigenous institutional cultural centers invited associate curators. And normally in Taiwan, we do have the 29 institutional cultural spaces across the Taiwan in different community. And it was my honors to be and guest curators to curate the yearly exhibition, especially at institutional culture space. And within the 2019 of the research project, I curated Alain Luluan Between Dreams at the second quinquennial International Indigenous Art Exhibition named Opportunity Continued Fire, which ran from the November 2019 to October 2020 at the National Gallery of Canada. In keeping with the gallery's first exhibition, Sakahan, which means lighting the fire, the elders from NSB community feel that Opportunity, the fire continuing to burn, was an appropriate title for the second exhibition showcasing Indigenous art and its makers from all over the world. In the elders field, Opportunity exists not in the ceremony, but in each individual internal flame. One eldest has a vision for the Opportunity exhibition, presenting his idea to the gallery. He argued that Indigenous artists from around the world create work for which the fire continued to burn from their mind, heart, and community. And anchors this idea, Opportunity built on the themes of Indigenous epistemologies or ways of knowing, and address in key concept of relatedness, continuity, and activisms. A relatedness is the notion that all things on the earth are our relation, a fundamental idea to Indigenous worldview. That continuity is relatedness across generation, history, and our futures. And that activation is about presence, how an artist intimidate a space, an object, or an idea through the performance videos or viewer engagement. Alain Luluan is Lukai Nation artist from Guchapuran community. Guchapuran in Chinese is Hao Cha Bulo. She was invited to present her work Between Dreams in the gallery space. And as co-curators for her work, I was invited to participate in the Opportunity panel discussion, Indigenous Way of Knowing. In this panel discussion, I examined the decolonial capacities of contemporary art and articulated performative epistemologies of relational transformation in spatiality through the work of Alain Luluan, as well as through my own curatorial approaches. Luluan specializing in sculpture and composite media and environmental installation, and her art practice addresses the monumental issue of colonial wound and land, disaster faced by the Indigenous people, inviting us to be witnessed and to engage in what we see and feel. Between Dreams demonstrate the hybrid relationship at the diaspora flow between the bodies and the mixed media, between the space and the memory. In this work, particularly, she used a massive amount of industrial material, Zion form, to weave a sheltered and warm-like peer space. It addresses her inner and spiritual condition, her personal challenges revolving around environment, community values, and the desire and concern of one original homeland. During the installation curatorial process, Luluan and I discussed the concept of relatedness in Austronesian Aboriginal artist Tracy Moffat's work, Spanish Windows, from the series The Body Memory. In 2017, de Moffat was the first Aboriginal artist to present Australia at the 57th edition Venice Biennale. Her photograph reshaped time, space, and cultures and memory erased the dilemmas of the tribal people facing the impacts of contemporary society with a distinct that resonate with references to the history of photograph. This is a dialogical relationship in the spatial discourse between Spanish windows and between dreams, instilled in performativity to the views of the models backed in Spanish windows. Lulu and between dreams correspond in with the procession, expanse, and existence of the tribal woman in different time and space from that expressed in the morphic photograph. The dialogue between these two words communicate a common sense of loose and resilient. The both words are rooted in time and space and visually expressed the situation of indigenous people, Natasha, migration, and the diaspora. The both artists are migrate from one part of the world to another and express the unique experience of culture and identity in the world they produce. The painting reflect an indigenous women's experience of the migrant as one displacement, dislocation, and hybridity, a mixture of experience and culture expressed in Spanish windows. Key to understanding indigenous decolonial accepted discourse is what Stephen Rutherford has called in continuity of expression related to the historical, religion, conceptual, general, tribal, cosmological. He stated that indigenous sectors convinced around a profound sense of place, connecting the spiritual with the natural. A search, Alain Luluan attempt to define the features of her installation as the genres genre diversity from the previously this concept of indigenous relational space and the viewer. In similar event, the Peter Morphin, a talent nation, performance artists, activists, and scholars not only perform around Luluan world, but also question how each indigenous world is actually a village or a collective of indigenous bodies. To this end, he created the piece Land That Breathe, which has designed to consider bodies and its moment to indigenous territory. At times, I was very literally in consider dialogue and how Morphin's bodies comes into the context with the land and in relation to Luluan Petrinjin in exhibition, merchant the Tibetan traditional territory and ungranted territory on which gallery is sided with Alain Luluan indigenous territory of Gutabuan, Kaotabulo. I invited the Morphins to engage Alain Luluan work that seeks to unite indigenous artists whose practice are rooted in the specificity of the territory and tribalized via their tribals, artistic embodies, and intellectual, and comes to shape the highly specific and globally interconnection dialogue on indigeneity. The viewer experience of art as an indigenous relational space surround the tribal public sphere where Petrinjin specifically resonates with represent with imaginary shift of the Lukai cosmatory slight how in Lukai nation, which means Dalalebe, standing next to the forming field of traditional hunting territory in the mountain. And I would also like to share the short clip for this exhibition. Sure.
The artist, I just wanted to say there will be a time for questions. Alors, si vous avez des questions.
然后是，我现在想起来是一个外国的编剧人家做客。
She remembered that it's one of the foreigners that went to Relational.
In Taiwan, so family received the very expensive boxes of that. Do you know what is material is? It is the fine. And how does this relate to your culture? 分享
We are different countries, but we have the core value of sharing. You know, we used to sharing to give the gift.
I find this is a very engaging work because first you have this beautiful kind of movement inside of something that is stable, and you have this roundness that brings people together inside, and you have, I'm looking up at this beautiful shape here. It's very delicate and strong at the same time. And the white, something about the white that is makes me think of snow.
Thank you. And this is my current exhibition, Resurgence, Solidarity, Indigenous Taiwanese Art at the Taiwan Indigenous People Cultural Proud in the Pingtung County in the southern part of Taiwan. At the core of this exhibition is the need for women togetherness as a life practice and togetherness as a methodology. The whether that be curatorial approach or personal philosophy, decolonizing Indigenous Taiwanese contemporary arts must include the privileges of voices and the input of Indigenous women artists. By bringing together the voices of the respected elders and three very powerful women's artists, the exhibition generates togetherness through trans-Indigenous cultural exchange across generations. It is about transmission of knowledge between people, land, and river. In Katatipo community in Taitung, Katati Bulo, where Milay Mafaliu grew up, the story of each year represents the passage through life. The sowing and the harvest festival that follows the growth of the millet, a eternal sacrifice that accompanies the disappearance of light, recording the growth and the passing of light year after year. Look back on yourself. The clue of memory comes slowly through your hand, delivering the tribe for the city, starting in the foreign country, in Japan, in Tokyo, and alien environment, the wandering on land where there is nothing, separately pursuing your desire. Milay Mafaliu said that I was not born optimistic. For Milay, there is what you may call suffering, a lack of love for the self. I often feel as if I know nothing at all, but she wants you to see her inner world of beauty. Anchored in this idea are these subtle rock, road, cliff, the build on the things of indigenous epistemologies of ways of knowing and addressed to the key concept of relatedness, continuity, and activism. And this is the later installation made by Alain Luluand, and she discussed the struggling condition of how Alain Luluand returning back to her original community in Gutapuand. And we do have the severe typhoon in 2008, 2009 in August, a Morocco typhoon. The most of the indigenous community, including my community, was severe demolished by the typhoon. And Alain would like to express her drastic change of the environment and her struggling condition of her inner mind and her inner world. So she tried to using the light to project this word in order to let the audience to feel the uncomfortable situation, uncomfortable sensual experience when you go inside this space. And unfortunately, this exhibition is until this Saturdays, and due to the COVID-19, the space is not open for the audience. And I would like to invite it to see our digital presentation, which collaborated with the Origin Festival, the First Nation from London, the funding by Council of British Council. And Alain Luluand inner world looked like a recycling factory and assembling lines. She has been the West collectorist exploring the trajectory of her life. Each time she moved to migrated border crossing and encounters, She took her stuff from cardboard boxes and carefully checked them during the process. She realized that each of her personal destruction in the past will be viewed like the virtue, as this item were to be moved from old Kutapu Ant, an old mist site, to a new one where she lived in the community of Duland. And this is the third invited artist, Arai Gomagant. She from Dase community in Pingdong County. Through the rumbling, a right hand touched the material itself. In the process of ink rolling and printing, both eyes must pay attention to relationships between the material and the paper at the same time. This kind of relationship is like her life, always paying attention to her Taiwan noble identity, cultural survival, and the values at the same time. This is the diverse and the multitasking extent, and it is always quite difficult. The rubbing carried the definition of a right life, a return to original community, Balirayan community, which in her home and her cultural heritage and all her childhood memory. After Typhoon Morocco in August 2009, where we were not allowed to return back to our original community, it is impossible for her to tear it down and take it down the mountains. So what we can do by rubbing, letting that trace be produced through her hand and brought down the mountains and put into the word, it may be a more contextual, creative thinking. This is the second word, tribal landscapes, is represent the landslide from new community Linali to old community Balirayan community. This documentary installation presents creative works Arai Gomagant, and this installation consists of 4 sub-themes: Taiwan cultural values and the active values of traditional art and culture embodied in Arai Gomagant institution. The second is reflective process of art making from traditional techniques to contemporary world, including Arai Gomagant experience of international residency and community participation in grassroots activism. The third is the rise of indigenous creative thinking and her work in relation to this. And the final is indigenous female power and the rethinking of Arai Gomagant work through her recent art and curation in Taiwan. And this exhibition attempt to explore the artistic process of subtent, shift, and expansion from the creation of personal experience like memory and cultural exchange. They are familiar with trauma, and their art often at once as a response and as an escape. As I mentioned, this exhibition also collaborated with the broader crossing origin, the Festival of First Nation, which is the Biennale Festival in London. And I have transformed my actual exhibition from Pingdong into the digital presentation at this website. If you are interested in the detail, you can check letters in my slide. I would like to share with you letters. And I think indigenous art has been a neglected and underprivileged catalog, seen in the eyes of Taiwan's dominant society and the governmental authority as a type of non-mainstream culture or supposedly entirety that need to strike a balance and fall in line with other ethnic groups. before to the conclusion, I would like to share another final clip for you. This one is this one. 4 minutes.
Hello, my name is Michael Walling and I'm the director of the Origins Festival. I'm an Englishman. I grew up in a place called Hereford, near to the border with Wales, and so my mountain is the Sugarloaf and my river is the Wye. It seems particularly important to use that indigenous form of introduction for this year's festival, because the current moment is forcing us to think more deeply about our connections to place and to environment. Does the land belong to us, or do we belong to the land? What you've just been watching is the opening ceremony a couple of weeks ago of an exhibition of Indigenous Taiwanese women's art, curated by Biung Ismahasan. It's an Origins event because we're hosting the online version of this wonderful work as a way of bringing it to a wider international audience. And the physical ceremony, led by an elder with food and dancing, is a reminder of all the things that we can't do this year here in London. Our usual festival with Indigenous artists flying in from all around the world and audiences gathering in packed theatres just isn't possible.
Okay, the final videos. And this is my exhibition website. If you are interested, you can see inside, and I would like to send more detail about my related exhibition to Desma. And the final video, I would like to play this my talk.
Hello everyone, my name is Biung Ismahasan. I'm Bunun curators from the Kanua community, Namasha of Kaohsiung in the southern part of Taiwan. It is my greatest honor to invite you to visit my latest exhibition at Taiwan Indigenous People Cultural Park in Pingdong. The exhibition is Resurgence and Solidarity, Indigenous Taiwanese Women Art. At the core of this exhibition is the need for Indigenous women's togetherness. Togetherness as the life practice, and togetherness as a methodology, whether that be curatorial approach or personal philosophy. Decolonizing Indigenous Taiwanese contemporary art must include privileging the voices and input of Indigenous women artists. By bringing together the voices of respected elders and three very powerful women artists, including Biung Nation, Ile Mafalin, Lukai Nation, Alunduluan, and Paiwan Nation, Arai Gumagan. This exhibition generates togetherness through trans-Indigenous cultural exchanges across generations. It is about transmission of knowledge between people, land, and river. Today, the right of the women, the protection of elders, and environmental concern are critical for many Indigenous Taiwanese women. There is a powerful sense of their search for new unexplored possibilities as they strive to carve out a place for themselves, an escape or departures from the familiar and the constraint of the COVID-19 pandemic. They deliberately located themselves in foreign or alien environment with an awareness of their differences, finding connections, experimenting with intensities. The artists in this exhibition, out of whom identify as feminists, make these journeys from the specific starting point of Native community experience. Their sovereign words and concern about environmental reciprocity. The core of this exhibition is the need for women's togetherness, because we need to unite. The women have long been the driving creative force behind Indigenous Taiwanese art, yet their individual contributions has been largely unrecognized, treated as an autonomous representation of entire cultures. Walking through togetherness, this exhibition aims to gather the physical experiences and the life stories of the women artists, to share their viewpoints in creative ways, to throw new light on perennial concerns, and to discuss new concerns in ways informed by tradition. In the global space of disorders, decline, obscurities, and alienation, it initiates an alternative culture and a way of being together. A woman's voice is like the drop of the water, and the voices of the group of the women can be condensed into the power of the river, amplifying their individual voices and blowing collectively in the space. The female body is the first dwelling place for human beings to enter this world. Their own energy is strong and gentle. In every generation, they exist quietly and solidly. Through the powerful object in their hands, they project the inner heart of the women. Lived and subconscious experiences are gradually pieced together in their life journey, responding to the texture of ethnic cultural memory and to drastic change in the environment. I maintain an indigenous centrism as the counterpoint to strive the production of knowledge about curatorial decoloniality. As established curators from Canada First Nation, Wanda Nabish asserts, the words like return, resurgence, and rewriting all have embedded in them a colonial idea of time, where we have not have continuity and contemporaneity, or even modernity, even if otherwise than its European version. Resurgence and solidarity, Indigenous Taiwanese women art connects any process of decolonization of Indigenous curatorial practice to question what the place of accepted in the colonial matrix of power, a machine that generates injustice, disavow, silent at all levels by articulating performative euthanasia and visualizing sovereignty of Indigenous land, female activism, their female resistance embodies cultures and communities. My curatorial methodology of their personal philosophy so bring together of the very features of the curatorial group as about curating together. I would say togetherness is actually the fundamental core values of being Indigenous curators. This exhibition attempts to explore the artistic process of acceptance, shift, and expansion from the creation of personal experience, life memory, and cultural change. It asks how time and history might be compressed and condensed into the spatial models of the women unity through life experience in the gender's body. Question about the disappearance of class and culture, the women's right to speak, and environmental care are of vital importance to many female artists. They are familiar with trauma, and their art offers at once responses and an escape. This exhibition consists of 4 sub-themes, including environmental reciprocity, cultural landscape, turning after healing, and the power of object. These themes respond to the core spirit of the entire exhibition through the words of the very powerful Indigenous Taiwanese women artists. The exhibition integrates these themes through their careful, deep exploration through art, offering youth perspective through the activation of female artistic unity.
To conclusion, I would like to use the Métis Nation from First Nation in Canada, David Garner. He said that Indigenous art critical writing, unlike most academic and curatorial writing, the critics should not be invested in the theory and then look forward of art that illustrate that point of view. They should be humble before the object or performance. Take it seriously as the word that can change our thought, feelings, behaviors, and narrate that passage. In my conclusions, Indigenous curating art of Taiwan is an emergent category that extend and adapt Indigenous ways of Indigenous ways of knowing and being into the contemporary moment and into the alternative space beyond our home territory. Indigenous criticism of Indigenous art begins with the knowledge that I am part of the community in Taiwan. Indigenous performative curation and chance indigenous connecting spatiality capture the particularity of indigenous to indigenous cultural exchanges and collaboration, but also consists of the media conglomerate representing an innovation as a multi-authored approach to reclaiming counter-narratives of cultural tradition. Research and embodies sovereignty and embraces land-based philosophy realized across tribal and state borders in indigenous exhibition. I have some few thought for my third exhibition, for my third research, and I hope I can give some point of the discussion later. The first is from indigenous communities, tribes to the world. What is the international position of Taiwan's native contemporary art? How do you view as relation with the world? From creative, curatorial research, writing, policy for formulation, etc. How to introduce Taiwan's indigenous contemporary art to the international audience, and what are the ways to help them understand, and how to avoid simplified, rigid, or spectacular style performance or show. Finally, how can contemporary art of Taiwan's First Nation connect community and generate meaningful dialogue with the contemporary art of the First Nation in the other regions? What is the basis of the dialogue, or what is the platform, the gains and the losses of cross-country cooperation and link? And this is my reference, and this is my talk. Thank you so much.
Very much, Bill, for your great talk. So, if anyone have any question for Dr. Bill, the floor is now open. And we've already received some question here, so perhaps I will also ask for you. That question is from Dr. Yuling Chow. So she has two questions. The first question Dr. Chow would like to ask is, indigeneity, 原民性, has broadly used by non-indigenous curator to include or giving a general definition on indigenous contemporary from her point of view. From her point of view, it may be delayering the diverse culture for different tribal culture and art. And how would you like to think about this point? And I would also like to read out her second question for you to think about. You have mentioned indigenous artists and curators need to try to subvert the traditional and dominant Han Taiwanese discourses towards indigenous culture and art. So she would like to know about any Taiwan indigenous artist who is trying to make this effort. So for other questions you would like to raise to Dr. Bill, you can use your raise hand function or typing in the chat box.
Can I answer the question or just a discussion?
You may well, I think you may want to answer the question or open up the discussion as you like.
Yeah, I think why I would like to not only answer the question, because I played a role of indigenous curators. I'm looking forward to hear the non-indigenous perspectives, because I thought research will get involved non-indigenous scholars and artists, and I hope to curate, to break down the relationship between indigenous and non-indigenous. At the previous time, we normally, in Taiwan, as you can see that a lot of Indigenous exhibition just only have the very clear insight about just only Indigenous artists can be get invited to present your work. But as I mentioned in the previously, the Pulima Art Festival, this is the platform, this is the governmental institutional platform created, formulated by Council of Indigenous People. They do have the Indigenous People Cultural Foundation. And they also have a lot of our previously the elder scholars who are non-Indigenous people to make this platform. So that's why I would like to say that why I'm looking forward to creating alternative platform as the independent curators. So that's why as my research is based on my exhibition. So firstly, I need to find the funding, fight for the funding, and make this exhibition and invite the potential artists I would like to explore. I would like to deeper understanding. And then after the curation, I used to write an article in, for example, this exhibition, Research and Solidarity, I was invited to write an article called Curatorial Futures, and produced by the University of Edinburgh and the Goldsmiths University of London. They combined to present this work in summer this year, and also the Asia Pacific Triennial in Brisbane. And why? Because there are not many Indigenous curators in Taiwan, and I hope to curate more and more exhibition. And also now, I don't, from now on, I don't have any chance to have a dialogue with the audience, especially for non-Indigenous audience, scholars, curators, and just like, or the graduate student to give me some idea, because in Taiwan is a diversity society. Really want everybody to get involved to see the Indigenous curation, not only my own voices. And also for the international collaboration, as an Indigenous curators, I also would like to, to put ourselves as in Taiwan's First Nation to collaborate with more Indigenous institutions. For example, this exhibition in Pingdong, we was invited to London to curate. Due to the COVID-19, is postponed to 2023, and also the Norwegian institution was invited to me to curate this exhibition, bring this artist to the Norway to collaborate with some artists. And I hope to answer the question about, the first question is from director, I'm sorry, I forgot the name, director. How do I think about the indigeneity articulated by myself and non-Indigenous scholars? And I think the indigeneity, the word 原民性, is really hard to describe within the one papers or within the one paragraph. So that's why I would like to focus on how can I describe my indigeneity, the meanings of indigeneity. As you can see, my catalog, I also have a PDF catalog. I can send it to Desmos. I hope Desmos can share with your students.
Yep.
And the audience. As you can see, this catalogs, I didn't use any Western and any scholar's word in my catalogs, because I play the role of in the back. I put artists in the front, and I would like to invite the audience to learn from the artist And the other wisdom is from their own elders in communities. So that's why we are making more and more. I would not like to say the discourses. I think it's our sovereign word through the exhibition. So my strategy is that I'm in creating any possibility of the sovereign initiative of invited indigenous artists, and making this collaborative process on my own. And I learn from them, and then I curate an exhibition for them, and then I create more programs to connect to the international entanglement, international collaboration for my futures. So the art of indigenous women art is the 3 years research project. And this year it's my first year. And I still know I cannot answer this question too. So that's why all of my discourses is from my artists, is from my elders, and from my community. Yes.
Yep. So thank you, Dr. Biung. And as Biung suggests, he would like to also hear the comments and the thoughts from the audience, and especially our students. So if you would like to have any inputs, any dialogues with Biung, the floor is now open. So do you indicate you may use the raise hand function or unmute yourself to speak out, and especially from students of our course, we have also some discussion along the issues of issues between satellite colonialism and critical Indigenous studies. So if any of you have any thoughts, so please comment on this, and please unmute yourself. Yep, the floor is now open.
And also, I would like to share with you this exhibition. The Research and Solidarity is going to curate another exhibition at MOCA in Taipei, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Taipei, in Zhongshan, right? And the opening will be the 13th of August until 10th of October. And I would like to send everybody's electronics invitation card to you. If you're interested, you can visit my second exhibition in Taipei. It's easier to visit.
Yeah. Great. Great. Perhaps let me put the inputs here first. Before your guest lecture begins, so we were having some discussion with our students. Perhaps this question may be also an indirect input to the question you raised for discussion. So one of our students, Nina, would you like to talk about your thoughts on so one of the readings that we assign to students is about the discussion between diversity and decolonization. Nowadays, so there is this discussion is, yeah, someone's think about, okay, we need to diversify our museum practices, but there's also the response is that diversity is not yet enough, and diversity is not equal to decolonization. And so I don't know whether it is a direct or indirect response to discussion that you would like to arouse. And there's also another issue that you would like. I think in your talk, one of the things that you arouse quite a lot of time is about the transnational and global indigenous movement and indigenous practices. And I would also like to know more about your thoughts about why it is important for indigenous curators and indigenous artists to engage with this global and transnational indigenous practices.
Yeah, thank you, Desmond. Thank you for your thank you for your question. It is yeah, I think it is very important to thinking about, because although my is curation-based research. My curation-based research is focusing on how trans-indigenous connectivity and indigenous spirituality is more important to me. I would say that I would like to include Ellen Luluan, what she said. Ellen Luluan, she produced the work almost 30 years, and she spent more than 25 years to fight for their life, to thinking about what is her right way to be an indigenous artist. She said that in Taiwan, she did a lot of exhibitions, she did a lot of artwork around Taiwan, just like the text, just like the project, just like the responsible for somebody to run the project. I can say that just a 任务, in Taiwan have the specifically cultured about the funding system. When the people would like to make an exhibition or made art, for example, public art in the land in Taiwan, you need to apply the funding for our national institution or local government that you need to be accompanied, and you have to apply the funding from the government, and then you invite the artists. And Ellen say that she feel that indigenous art need to go abroad, go out, fly to another country to collaborate with them. Every single of our collaboration with other country, we used to have the residency before the opening. For example, we used to plan the 2-week residency in order to connect each others. When people in Taiwan, most of the people in Taiwan are not familiar about how non-indigenous people to get involved with indigenous people. For example, we used to live together. We used to stay together and having dialogue every day, not only just 1 day, but also more than 2 weeks. So that's why Ellen always say that she's willing to having the collaboration in international institution. So for example, my one article is published at Abu Dhabi. This is the second quinquennial exhibition at National Gallery of Canada. And this is the very significant exhibition. Every 5 years, National Gallery of Canada and the Canadian government, they did 50 years for presenting indigenous First Nation art. And Taiwan, just I think we just have the beginners of 2010. So that's why we need to make more and more exhibition, more and more collaboration. So that's why I'm thinking about what is our platform and what is our dialogue. It's really important. The dialogue I created used to invite the artists, invite the people close to the artist as my own habit, as my own ways of making the collaboration. I used to work with the artists without routine schedules, because artists have their own schedules, and most of the artists didn't have the routine schedules. For example, when we decide, or when we make appointment, for example, for tomorrow afternoon, if the artist didn't have the great connection, and they will not talk to you, you know what I mean? So we are the artistic practitioners. So that's why the curator needs to, to having the talk and have the conversation with about their uncomfortable situation. So a lot of time, you need to spend a lot of time to get involved. So that's why it is hard to formulate a process of how you can collaborate or approach with the artist, because every single artist have the different personality and they have different thought. So that's why the curators is not an easy job.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you agree with that?
I understand. Yeah, so let's see whether there's some. Let me check the chat box to see whether there's something coming. Yeah, the floor is now open. So if anyone of you would like to speak something, do you unmute yourself and speak up? And there are also some raised hand and reaction functions in the platform. So yep. And I think we have time for around 1 or 2 inputs before we end. So do you make use of this chance? And if you like to type in the chat box and would like me to read for you, you can also use the chat box function.
I wonder if this is appropriate to ask here. Okay. But I wonder what building of indigenous work as part of the
Sinophone studies.
Sinophone study. Sinophone studies is related to Chinese study.
It's the idea proposed. Perhaps Yating, would you like to speak up? Would you like to unmute yourself to speak up?
I feel,
okay. Sorry.
华语语系研究 ，OK。
Hi.
Do you want to say more?
I'm having an echo.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll unmute myself. Sorry.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. There's an echo.
Perhaps you also need to mute yourself when Yating speaks.
Okay. There's an echo.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, because regarding the Sinophone studies.
There's a Centers for Sinophone Study at your university system of Taiwan.
Yeah, I also share your talk at the Society of Sinophone Studies yesterday. Basically it's a study proposed by Professor Mishi on the issues of the sort of Chinese speaking world beyond China, and also Professor Chi also recently also thinking about to put Taiwan studies back into the global scenes, need to reflect upon the settler colonialism situation in Taiwan, and putting back the indigenous studies into the center of the studies, according to her latest edited book with Dr. Cai Qing at the National Zhongxin University. So perhaps yeah, I think you'd like to elaborate a little bit more your points on the type. You can type it or speak up.
Okay, sorry, I fixed the microphone problem. So because I understand, like according to Professor Sisume and other Sinophone studies scholars, they do incorporate like the Taiwanese indigenous writers and artists or scholars into the sphere of their Sinophone studies, because they think of it as a decentering or, you know, a way out of the mainland China, that kind of the program. But I'm not sure if Biung is familiar with this, or if this is appropriate to ask him at this point.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think you know that in 2009 the exhibition I brought Alain Luluan to National Gallery of Canada, and National Gallery of Canada invited Sisume, who is the professor, right? Who is a professor from
UCLA,
California, UCLA, and from America, and the gallery invited Sisume to have the keynote speakers in the exhibition. And I know she's the elder scholars for doing the indigenous people indigenous study in Taiwan. Yeah, so your question is
yeah, I guess because Sinophone would be referring to Huayu, meaning using that kind of the Chinese or, you know, Sinophone languages. But if indigenous artists and writers are writing in, say, for example, their own indigenous languages, right? And would that be considered as Sinophone by, for example, yourself or your artists that you collaborate with?
I haven't ever considered about your question.
Okay, that's okay.
It is a good question for me, and as I mentioned that the history of indigenous contemporary art, which is my research, is not very long, just since 1990s until now. So that's why my role as indigenous curators, when I'm doing the research, as I mentioned before that, I used to spend more and more time to get involved with others. And I don't know, other scholars have this kind of how to say that, you know, just not only on the paper's work, you know, especially the art, the curation, the collaborative process need to be get involved face-to-face collaboration, because it is very important to write it down about your work in the papers. So that's why our elders always say to me that the one of the elders from Arai, she said that she finished her master degrees in fashion and design from Pingdong University of Technology, Pingdong Keji Daxue, and she's very worried about the making the discourses of including the scholars discourses and using not only non-indigenous and indigenous scholars the papers in including her work. And the elders from her community, she said that you need to take all this down. You need to forget this and just do the research with the elders. I also still don't know that is this the good way, or is this the possible to producing the thesis, dissertation, without any academic theoretical background? Yet I think it will be the chance for indigenous people, but she got a degree in January, and because I help her to revise her thesis as outsiders. but between our conversation, and she always feel that because I'm not judging about the non-indigenous scholars, because we always can feel that this kind of word is not related to me, or is not, we can feel what non-indigenous scholars, the papers related to my own cultures. So that's why my third research is looking forward to collaborate with non-indigenous scholars to create indigenous exhibition in Taiwan. So I would not like to divide it, in Taiwan. You are indigenous people, it belong to Council of Indigenous People. You are Hakka people, you belong to the Council of Hakka people. We don't have more chance to get involved together, to have the deeper, to make the deeper process of our collaboration. This is my thought. So I couldn't answer your question, and this is a good question for me. And I will also ask another elder scholars, what do they think?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't very articulate with my question. I was fixing the microphone because I had both the laptop and the iPhone on at the same time. So there was an echo. Thank you very much.
This one, if you don't mind, I can write an email about the information and links to you, and you can share it with the audience, and you can share with your students.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for this question from Shaoqi, right? Thank you for your question. I really love your question. I think not only you, but also my non-indigenous friend. These friends, and your diversity is a post-colonial sense always suggests a positive representation for indigenous cultures. But what struck you the most is how I beautifully weave the alcoholism abuse into the performance I help curate. And non-indigenous are kind of prohibited from talking about the state-dominated representation. Can you share more thought on the only positive presentation? Yeah, so that's why, as you can see in my previous curation, from now on, for example, my second exhibition, I'm going to collaborate with the non-indigenous curators from Taipei MOCAs. So that's why a lot of not only for you, Shaoqi, and also my non-indigenous friend, always think that when non-indigenous people to facing the sensible issue, for example, alcoholism, they are afraid of talking about this problem through any artistic way of presentation. So that's why I would like I wish to be the first person for the indigenous people to break down this line between us. So this is very important. So could you share, could you share some thought on the only positive representation? What do you mean, the positive representation? You mean, Sauchi, you mean, let's say that, can you explain more?
Hi, sure.
Yep.
I mean, when we talk about putting stress on diversity in exhibitions, we would always put on those beautiful artifacts and also the history about it. But I mean, it's hard to see that to see those, as I said, the stigmatizing representation, such as the alcohol abuse. And I mean, what do you think about when we're very carefully putting out those performances? I think there's a very subtle pressure that pressures us to put on only the beautiful side of those culture, and so that's what that's why I asked you to share about this. Okay. Because you do something different than only the beautiful side of the culture or anything. Is that clear enough?
Yes, it's very clear. I can understand you that alcoholism and alcohol abuse is the common issues not only in Taiwanese indigenous community but also in other countries. But the truth is that we indigenous people didn't talk about the alcoholism in our own daily life. So that's why I would like to. So that's why I used to more than 3 years to curate this outdoor performance-based curation, to invite all the audience to think about what is the values of drinking alcohol, that due to the globalization, because we can easily to buy the alcohol in the community using the money. But before that, our ancestor, this is the PDF. I can share this PDF of my alcoholism issue, and I mentioned about this, my thought inside. And at the previous time, our ancestors made the millet wine. Why we make the millet wines? Because the millet wine can be connected to our ancestor, and every different tribe, every different nation have different description about making the millet wine. For my Bunun millet wine, is used in the ceremony, and the air hunter ceremony, we made this the millet wine before the festival and ceremony, and during the festival we using this ceremony to connect to our ancestor. And so why the people felt that we always the indigenous people like to drinking alcohol, I think there's it is the big lesson. I think it is another big lectures I would like to explore. So I think I can share this catalog with you later.
Yep. Thank you, Biung. Yeah, I think it's now running out of time. So although we still have some question, I'll email those questions for you. So if to see whether you have some thoughts. So and yep, and it's also running out of time. Shall we thanks Dr. Biung for his fantastic talk and a great discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Justina, I can email to you about your question. Thank you for your question.
So yep. Okay. I'll stop recording here. Thank you, Dr. Biung.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day as well.
Thank you.
Bye.